Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution with Matt Watson.
Hello, welcome to Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution. I'm your host, Matt Watson. This week we have special guest, Mr. Pete Thomas, the chairman at AU Secure, and he's a gold expert. He's in the press all the time. Pete, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Matt. I mean, we've only known each other for a couple decades. It's the first time we've done a show together. I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I'm really thrilled that you called me the other day and we got this happening. So tell me a little bit. Give me the background on this group of yours, AU Secure.
Well, AU Secure's been around for about 16 years. I met them when I had released all of the gold equipment that was selling gold coins and whatnot at airports. And We had them in all the airports all around the world. And they had developed a machine that used ocular identification. And I was tremendously interested in putting that on my machines so that individuals, for example, people are going back to the Middle East and they got a pocket full of cash, they'd much rather have a piece of gold. So we were just killing it with that. And we met and designed equipment around the use of that, and we became very good friends. And their back office was so strong that I was constantly going back to them because, as you know, I owned Tornado, which was the only independent hedging platform in the industry for metals. And so occasionally we would need some help, and man, those guys were great. So then when my partner passed away, Tom Garland, and my wife contracted cancer, and I wanted to be with her in her last time. So I stepped away from Zaner and kept my CTA active, put my license in my CTA, and then after my wife passed, Hadi came to me from AU Secure, and he said, "Look, we need someone to put the big shoes on and run the game. Would you do it for us?" And
wow.
I said, "Yeah." I definitely would. I like you guys. I enjoy you guys, and there are too many memories at the old place. So yeah, let's hook up. And I been doing their offshore stuff: Dubai, Cairo, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and we pushing into Cairo now. And it's been a lot of fun.
Wow, what a story, man! My goodness. Well, let's jump into it if you don't mind. Let's talk a little gold and silver. Here's the trend on the price fix for some 24 years. If you were to plot out gold on the left-hand axis there, you can see we're approaching $2,500 a troy ounce, but it's growing at an average kind of year-over-year price CAGR of 8.8%. Silver on the right-hand axis, we're pushing around 30, and it's climbing at a CAGR of 7.8% year-over-year. I chuckled. I was going to ask you make the investment case, but I don't know. Isn't this the investment case right here?
Well, I mean, look at it. Really, that is a beautiful inverted head and shoulders with the breakout there. I mean, that is, if you're a technician, it doesn't get better than that. But, the one thing that you remember, Matt, and I don't know if our viewers do, but I was probably the largest silver trader in the world. I was at the point where we controlled 2/3 of the supply of silver in the world. Right. And I was when I was representing the Hunt brothers. Of course, it wasn't my money, but it was nice to pick up the phone and say, "Send $100 million today," And I've always been active in silver, and it's interesting to see. It's the poor man's gold now. It's really changed its hat, and people are coming in going, "I don't have $2,500 to buy an ounce of gold, but I'll buy some silver." And it's really, really working out well for them.
Absolutely. And I'll have a couple slides on that later. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. A dear friend of mine, Alex Patel, he was with DuPont for decades. And he too was, they had a corner on that silver market. They were, at least a third of the market for 4 decades, right? Feeding into DuPont's conductive adhesive materials and all the paste and all that. So, but yeah, I think this is one of the best propositions. I had a bunch of technical charts. I was going to show this gold relative, the inverted relationship with the 10-year Treasury real yield, and those sorts of things. A little bit decoupled here in the last couple of years, but just to show people the overall supply and demand picture. looks something like this. I'm going to reference the World Gold Council's their Gold Hub database.
They
Just
always
to give
do.
people,
They have good work. Gold
yeah,
Council,
yeah.
absolutely.
Metals Focus is the team behind this, helping to feed these numbers. So, but you can see the central bank buying, and there's lots of questions about where the central banks are going. Here's your bars and
Yeah,
coins. All the various bullion products has been a rather stable in that darker green. Technology has been bouncing around between 6 to 9% of the overall demand. This includes
right.
semiconductor, electronics, medical diagnostics. I think it's a little bit understated. I'll get into that in a second. But jewelry, of course, huge amounts of gold goes right to jewelry, and then
Yeah,
ETFs, whether it be positive or there be outflows as the price is climbing. ETFs being, those are the major buckets, if you will, just so
yes.
everybody is level set. Again, just real
And let's
quickly.
set the
I'm sorry.
table on the ETF for a minute, Matt. In that,
Yeah,
for the last 12 months, the ETFs have been offloading or selling,
yeah,
or equity has been going out.
right.
This month is the first month that we have seen a positive inflow into the ETFs. So I just wanted to let people know that there are changes occurring here.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have a picture of that ETF moving picture in just a moment.
Oh, beautiful.
But that's exactly right. That's
Yeah,
I'm really interested. Silver. We talk about silver. It's going to become more and more of an industrial metal, if you will, over time. I think
well put.
even though the percentages are low, gold as well. Gold is so important in the electronics world, on these interconnects, in all the IC and semiconductor space, and really an
Yep.
important space, especially with AI that's going to start booming. I think some of the gold
On these
loadings are
little babies, I bid on selling the gold to Apple when they started building their phones, and they were stunned at the amount of gold they were going to need. And I said, "I got it, baby. Come on, bring it on."
oh yeah,
And you're exactly right. We're seeing a bigger draw for gold for its conductivity and its long life.
right.
And so, yeah, you're 100% right there, my friend.
Yeah, I'm gonna have one of these programs devoted to AI. There's a lot of people questioning silver and gold and even copper demand going into the AI space, these AI data centers. Fascinating topic
Well,
on its own.
you
But
know, now that we're on that, if you want to push something, this morning at about 7 o'clock, old Elon was chatting away, and he's talking about creating what he's calling a gigafactory, brand new
yeah,
term,
yeah,
and the gigafactory is going to capture and produce 100,000 specialized chips devoted exclusively to AI.
right,
So the demand, as you're saying, for chips and for AI and usage,
yeah,
biggest player in the book just came in, and as a sidebar to that, Matt, even though we usually talk precious metals,
right,
he just bought half of the production of in Indonesia, and he's because he's looking downstream like almost 20 years, and he just bought about half of their production. So a
yeah.
lot of nickel is coming off of the table here in the near term future, just for his usage for this gigafactory production.
Yeah, and copper as well. Absolutely.
Yes.
By the way, the server blades that go into the data center, that's where a lot of the gold resides in some of the boards that help direct all this traffic within the data center. But yeah, again, look forward. Again, I'll have an AI devoted session. So just breaking out the technology piece here. Here's again the Gold Hub, the World Gold Council's outlook. There was a decline in gold. I can explain this earlier on. This has to do with bonding wire, where a lot of the bonding
Ah,
wire used to be thicker and just entirely gold. They did some design alternatives. They've gotten into pure silver. They've gotten into pure copper. They've gotten into palladium plated on top of copper. So they've got a couple other flavors that have reduced the aggregate amount of troy ounces of gold going into bonding wire. But since then,
I
I
see.
really have a hard time believing this thing is flat. Again, e-waste guys are just salivating over these data centers when they decommission
Oh yeah.
the hard drives and the server blades. I mean, that's like top-notch tier 1 feedstock for an
Yeah.
e-waste guy. They just love that. And so
Yeah.
And so, being from the Silicon Valley, I could paint the picture of what's going into semiconductor pretty precisely. And again, it's climbing for gold. So I have a little heartburn here. But let's talk about central banks and what the heck's going on. So we had a bumper 22 and 23, and we look at
Yep.
where we're at in 24. There's been some little bit of paranoia that China, kind of hit the brakes here in the first quarter and started slowing down.
Yeah.
I got a little pictorial down here so you can see kind of the aggregate accumulations, just to give you some context and some who's got what. But
Yeah.
I was interested to see there was a note that came out this week, again from the World Gold Council. They do these surveys now a couple times a year, and all the reserve managers, 81% of them say, hey, they're going to be increasing their holdings over the next 12 months. So even though
I saw that. I was fascinated by it. And just to reiterate how powerful the numbers are that you just mentioned, I want you to look at this and look at China. May, or the start of May, estimated that they were going to consume 170 metric tons. It's not like they're a small player in this business, and and when they pumped the brakes, if you will, and said, "Hey, we're no longer going to be buying gold," there is a real pent up aggression in the Asian, the Chinese buyer, because what people here forget is that in 1949 to 2003, they had the same laws in effect for gold as they did for opium. So it was illegal for Chinese citizens to own any type of gold in any form. And when they removed that, there was a 17-month stampede into buying gold in China. And it was going out of Hong Kong as fast as they could get it over there with really, really high premiums. So it's important that you mention, that China pumped the brakes on their 17-month buying spree,
Right. No, and to your point, China's the biggest, near-term buyer. The U.S. population is largely already accumulated. It's not that we're adding much to it. China, I think, is the biggest buyer on the block here as of late. Yeah, hitting the brakes, about to hit the gas and go more here is what the messaging is. So I think that's fantastic. Again, maybe that's contributed to a slight pause, if you will, in the price of gold here in 2024. But look for more pressure as the Chinese turn the spigot back on, I think is really the message.
I agree with you 100%. I think that they're going to come in. And you know what else is interesting, man? Like I'll see these bids, like somebody say, hey, Azerbaijan just bought 2 tons of gold. And I'll be, who?
Right.
I mean, we've got new players. Uzbekistan wanted a ton of gold. I was like,
yes, some of the stands, really? Some of the stand countries are buying as well. Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and they're coming in, heavy. And we've never seen that before. This is the first time.
Yeah, for their relative GDP size. Yeah, they're relatively heavy hitters relative to their size. Yeah. Agreed. No, yeah. I think we're absolutely in sync there. Here I've got a CME futures net positions on the left for gold and the ETF or electronic product holdings on the right. We've seen a little bit of bleed off from the peak volumes of where we were at. We're down here closer to about 90 million troy ounces. But still, I think significant holdings on the electronic product side. And then, I think the market position has been, net long for quite some time now, right? And
I mean, it's funny, as former floor trader, and you've been around the markets forever, Matt. You say to yourself, who's on the other side of my trade? Who's short? And, we started massive accumulations for our client base at 1,800. And who's sitting on a $600-700 loss on the other side? It's got to be somebody, and it's very interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the personal investor, and you service these clients. How much gold should
Yeah,
everybody be holding? How much should we be holding? And I think it's hysterical. I saw this B of A Global Research put out this thing. 71% of
yeah,
advisors have very little, 0 to 1% of their positions in gold. A
right.
percentage, 1 to 5. What's your outlook? What do you coach your investors? How much of a position should they
Well,
hold?
let's get the big paintbrush out first, all right,
Okay.
and give our investors a nice overview. Give our viewers, the Kitco people, love to be educated. That's why I like appearing here. Um, when Nixon decoupled us from gold and we
Right.
became a non-gold backed currency, all right. Gold didn't do too much. It did then it did start a little climb, and subsequent to that, really, United States investors weren't real buyers of gold coins. We make beautiful. Chairman Moy brought back the American Gold Eagle, and kudos to him. What a great guy he is. And we saw a little more interest and a little more interest. And really, I started recommending about 5% of portfolios moving into gold.
Right.
Now, I'm getting calls, and the reason I mentioned us being decoupled was when we were decoupled, they notified all of the schools, Harvard, Wharton, all of the major universities to say, look, your MBA programs no longer need to teach about gold. It isn't money anymore. So, I mean, literally, I'll get a CEO of a major firm, a multi-billion-dollar firm, say, "Hey, I've been trying to look you. I got a hold of you. Explain to me what this gold stuff is," because they never saw it in school. They've never really purchased it. They don't know,
Right.
and so what's happening is we're seeing individuals come in now going, I've been wanting to buy this for a while, and my and guidance over at whatever bank you might happen to have is telling me, no, you don't want to own that stuff. And I've been trying to buy it since 1500, and so I'm inverted now to where I went from 5 to 10%,
Wow.
and then at maybe 4 years ago, I said it's time to go to 20% because the stock market was taking off. And if the stock market falls and falls hard,
Right.
what good is 5% going to do you? It's not going to do you anything. If you
Uh,
have 20% holdings in precious metals, they will go down.
right.
Don't it is a safe harbor. But when people are having margin calls, they have to sell everything they can. Gold will feel the pressure from a huge stock break, but it won't fall as fast, and you'll still be able to use it as a currency. So I'm at 20% for the first time in my life, and
Hmm.
it's really holding true at these levels.
Wow. And when you bring up, geopolitical risks, I mean,
Yes.
not to panic about current times, but hell, I'm panicked. There's two big issues. There's two big issues in my mind. One is just all the unfunded liabilities with China. One, which
One.
may be bearing out, right, with their real estate market just falling apart now.
Oh, it's
Um,
a disaster. If you remember, I'm so glad you touched on that point. China had massive unemployment when they did the agrarian shift
right.
from bringing people from the smaller towns into the cities. And so they started building phantom cities, they called them
Yeah,
at that time, if
sure.
you remember. And
Yeah.
they built 5 cities that nobody lived in, but they were
Pete,
buying material,
Pete,
they were pouring concrete, and now, one of the reasons I believe that they're hitting the brakes on a lot of their purchases, they're tearing those cities down and they're recycling the stuff. And
well,
so we've got a big pause
let me
going
throw you
on here.
let me throw you a stat on that, Pete. So they overbuilt 60 million residential housing units. That's
Yeah,
enough to house all of Italy. You can house all of Italy with their excess sitting idle. And yeah, it's kind of a thing, right? And these
well,
unfunded liabilities is not just at the China government level. It's all these jurisdictions as well that have just way overspent
well,
and rapidly
yep.
expanding that country. The other geopolitical risk that just scares the hell out of me, and it's one that's on our docket right here and now that's not getting enough press in my mind, and that's Taiwan. We've heard
Oh,
about all the rattling with China on Taiwan. And I can't stress this enough. When you look at the semiconductor market and you look at the more advanced, what they call nodes, the fine pitch, the more advanced chip capabilities on wafer level,
Right.
Taiwan controls 90% of the advanced nodes, 7 nanometer and below. I mean, if you take over that country, you can dramatically impact AI, automotive, just a whole litany of markets are going to just suddenly be exposed. And I got to believe that would result in one of the most aggressive trade wars you've ever seen. But that is a near and present risk. And not to get too political, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen on Biden's watch, in relatively short order here, right? I think if they're going to act, it's going to be pretty quick in the next 3 or 4 months. So
Well,
something I'm paranoid
unfortunately,
about.
Matt, it makes sense. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just there's no question. And oh, by the way, most people don't happen to understand that North Korea, which doesn't exist, if you ask anybody, it's this little rock over there. They're bringing in a lot, not a little bit, a tremendous amount of rare earths.
yeah,
And we need rare earths to build all this stuff.
yeah,
And oh, Putin's there today discussing, of all things, rare earths. So,
yeah.
they would have both sides. If they had Taiwan, and they have all the production coming out of North Korea, and plus there's a few other from there over a few other countries producing and selling them their product.
Right.
We have a big problem here because, as you know, it almost takes 7 years to complete the permit process to
Oh,
drill, let alone
yeah.
to get a mine producing. It's unbelievable.
Rare earths drive me nuts. Again, rare earths are not rare. It's fairly abundant. There's over
Right,
300 to 400 years worth of known reserves. These are junior projects that are already mapped out. The problem with rare
right.
earths is that they are filthy, beyond filthy. And
Oh, I
for
mean,
all you clean energy advocates, you think you're clean. These windmills with up to a ton of rare earths, that is the most polluting and destructive frickin' stream
oh,
of
and
material
it
in the world.
needs so much water to do
Oh,
rare earths. It is unbelievable. So, and
yeah.
I always look at people and go, "Oh, look at that beautiful windmill and all the electricity it's producing," and I just start cracking up, and
Ah,
I go,
oh,
"You knew what was in that thing and what they're going to do with it when
yeah,
when it runs out of its life shelf."
right.
Oh my God! You hit the nail right on the head, my friend.
But Pete, we got to save the planet. If we don't do this, we're all gonna
Yeah.
die. Jeez
Yeah,
Louise,
yeah.
give me a break.
And I look at him and I go, let's see, you've got an EV car, so you're saving the planet, so you're sitting on all this lithium. If
Right.
they saw how that was mined, they would freak out. And oh, by the way, we went from 15 to 23 pounds of copper in a normal car, and an EV's got as much as 100
Oh,
pounds of copper. And
oh,
oh, by the way, they dig that out of the ground. It's
oh,
not exactly, it doesn't fall off a tree. It isn't a harvest.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't even, it's just delusional.
yeah. It is. It is. Okay, so your latest kind of your bullion competition's coming in the form of Costco. What do you think of that? And here is
Oh,
I just and
I had, I,
here's a page on your products that you offer on your website. All sorts of gold, silver, platinum, palladium, a
sure.
number of different forms of
Well, Ace
different.
Secure has always been a rapid delivery source for retail,
Right.
and we are behind the curtain stuff for our wholesalers is a different thing. But as far as Costco goes, I mean, I did the interview for the Wall Street Journal on it, and I told people, I said, listen, I am very good friends with MKS, MTB, and PAMP, and I have been selling PAMP product for decades. It is a very good product, and I think I found it fascinating that they decided to shelve it. And people are, oh, I'm going to get some veal cutlets, and I'm going to get a little
Yeah,
bit of lettuce, and oh, I'll buy a gold bullion here.
yeah,
It's
that's
just it was just a brilliant move. And you know what? They told me they can't keep it in stock.
yeah,
It
yeah.
goes and I offered them silver. I said, hey, let's start doing silver. So that they were way ahead of the curve.
I get so frustrated with some of the major precious metals processors. One of my former employees, the Japanese Tanaka in particular, they're keeping their bullion confined basically to mainland Japan. They aren't going international with it. And I think
Right.
that's just a huge mistake, just an absolute
Oh,
giveaway mistake. And I keep working Frank Tanaka. He's got to get them to shift their strategy and open it up. But yeah,
well,
I think there
with
could be
Japan.
more flow of these products if we would get more participants in the marketplace. So
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is that there, though, I will tell you, I was with talking to I got to be careful here because I got a stack of NDAs over there. Okay, but let's say a major buyer in the Middle
yes,
East, and
right,
I had a bid from someone, and I called him up and I said I need X amount of gold, and he goes, "We don't sell gold." I go, "What are you talking about? I know what that you've been
yeah,
buying tons for years." He goes,
yeah,
"No, no, no, no. We only buy gold. It doesn't go anywhere." And I was like,
right.
"Thank you for taking my call." So
No,
I
that's
mean,
like yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
Tanaka and Metalor together have some 1,600 tons of refining capacity a year. That's massive.
Oh,
What do you can't give a good piece of that into? Doesn't make sense.
oh, yeah. You know what? The thing to do with them, I'm actually kind of familiar with it, and it would be just to set up an international trading desk so that
Yeah,
you could trade, Singapore, London, and Chicago, let's say, or New
yeah,
York, and then what you do is when you have that production and you've seen the swings between backwardation and contango, it's
yeah,
insane, and right now when they're at 11% over in Singapore, I mean, you could get 11% on your money. Hey, you know what? Take a
right.
look at what annual T bills are paying right now versus 10% on your gold today. I
Right.
mean, you just take that money and you just wait for a minor setback and buy your gold back on the futures
Yeah,
for
bye-bye.
maybe December. I mean, it'd be so easy to fix that for them.
Yeah, buy on the dip. I knew this would happen. Once we got on a program, you and I would just go on and on endlessly. We got to keep moving. Let's talk silver. Let's shift to
Absolutely.
silver. So I've got a low case and a high case. This is my low case, just to give people a picture of the demand, everything from net physical investment, silverware, again, jewelry in this color. There's a whole series of industrial applications, including ethylene
Yeah.
oxide catalysts, brazing alloys and solders, the automotive silver loadings, just like copper. On copper, you're seeing like 3x loadings. On silver, it's closer to 2x on a BEV. Of course, solar PV is a topic on its own, which I'll have a slide or two here in a minute. Power
Oh, that good.
distribution, consumer electronics, semiconductor, my goodness. And I look at this and I look at just kind of the industrial demands and kind of the projected trajectories on where they're at. Put aside jewelry and net physical. And, the outlook for the mining and recycle is something like this. I mean, there's no way this just doesn't step into a chronic structural deficit position, right? There's just no way we.
No, there's no way. And you actually created a bifurcation in our conversation here, in which uh, uh, we have to look at silver now. Silver is like 50% industrial, and then flatware and jewelry and usages like that. But I projected on my last interview on Bloomberg. I said, look, I believe we're going to 75% industrial with silver, and it's going to be inverted for the first time in its history. And I believe that very, very firmly. And I'm going to stand behind that because of this very reason that you brought up, man.
And Pete, so that's exactly my point. As we step into about the mid 30s here, all these industrial applications would presumably push jewelry and the net physical out. So, yeah, I think today we're at about 60% industrial. It's going to push to 100% in fairly short order. Is I think the outlook, right? It's really going to put pressure on silver mining, even as byproduct mining. How do we pick up more of this? And there's another storyline, Pete. I'm really worried about the recycle piece of silver. Too much of
Absolutely right.
the electronic waste is what an e-waste guy would characterize as low-grade silver. It's there. Yeah, you could technically recover it, but you spend more in recovering it than what the value of the metal is worth. So they don't do it. So they
That
let a lot of it go by.
that and during COVID, the recyclers really saved this country because they were the guys that were out there. They at one point they were 30% of the entire amount of product coming out. But to get to your point, so that our viewers can get a better handle on this, the low grade, like the lead solder, things like that, are have a very, very low yield, and are really, not only are they toxic, but it involves a lot of chemicals and a lot of water, and so you're creating a lot of waste also.
Right.
So the recycling of silver itself isn't what people imagine it to be. It's costly. It's ineffective. And unfortunately, we will not see a lot of the product coming back into the recycling loop that's going out for all the electronics. So I think that's a very important point you brought up.
No, and I just encourage everybody, turn in your old phones, your old iPads. I've got a nightstand filled with them. I've really got to be disciplined and take them all in just to get it back into the system, right? It does us no good sitting idle. You're better off getting
Well,
it back.
I was sitting in a meeting in Dubai with the royal family talking about what they were going to do, because they gift when a new iPhone comes out, everybody gets one. Here you go. Come pick it up. It's only 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is.
Right.
And they have tens of thousands of them laying around, and they were trying to figure out what to do with them. We had a very lengthy conversation about it and how to capture it and how to do it. So you're exactly right. So it isn't just here. It's all over the world that we're not seeing the 73 metals that are in those phones. Yeah. We could use a lot of them back.
Exactly. Turn in your stuff, right? When you're done with it, turn it in.
Please do, yeah. Absolutely right.
Hey, real quick, I want to set up a solar conversation with you real quick. And I know you're not a solar guy. Just as a reminder, I did build a solar factory once upon a time in my career, so I have some experience here. But when you look at what's going on in terms of macro trends, the International Renewable Energy Agency, they emphasize, hey, the cost of these renewables, wind and solar, progressively is getting lower and lower over time. And they've laid out roadmaps for us. And I chuckle at the roadmaps because the goalposts move every couple of years. And so back in 2018, they said, hey, of our global power grid, 86% are going to be non-renewable, and 14% renewable was kind of the baseline in 2018. And they said, hey, we want a roadmap by 2050 where we're going to grow those renewables to 23%. And then I chuckle because IRENA came out in 2021. They said, well, no, what we really meant was 74% renewables. And then they came out just a year later and said, what we really meant was 90% renewables. So yeah, goalposts are moving just a lot. But the question comes up, how much solar do you need? And there's a lot of questions about variable renewables and the impacts of doing that. You need to have a storage capability on our grid.
That is the issue.
And that could potentially involve PGMs. This is where there's a potential hook for PGMs that people don't see coming. But then I look at the grid, and here's a depiction of the overall global power grid. This is global electricity generation. This is where we've been. This is the actual historical. So we're sitting around 30,000 terawatt hours of electricity generations per year. And if you listen to IRENA, this is kind of an artist concept drawing of what they're trying to depict. They're saying, hey, we need to set aside a bunch of space for green electrolyzers to generate these clean hydrogen streams. We got some other demands, buildings, EV charging. If you're going to have over 1 billion EVs on the road, you basically need to grow today's grid by plus 50% just to charge those EVs. And then, hopefully you can hold buildings and industrial with thrifting, hold those relatively flat. So you got a picture that looks like this. Clean energy advocates are starting to freak because they realize they missed a whole category that is now significant, and that's this AI, these AI data centers.
Exactly right.
AI data centers can consume anywhere from 10 to 30x the power of a typical data center, and they want 40% of the data centers to be AI capable. So there's a huge power draw. Today, it's about 1.5% of the global grid feeds data centers, but it's going to quickly grow to 6% and potentially higher. Wow. So, again, that's a discussion. So maybe that should be a sliver on the chart. But then I turn to, well, how much solar do we need, and how much silver is going into that solar? And that's what this is, again, my base case. IRENA initially called out, hey, we need 14 terawatts of total installed active solar capacity. And so there's a ramp to getting to that 14 terawatts. And in terms of silver demand expressed in millions of troy ounces, in fairly short order, you get to a peak of about a little over 300 million. And then there's design thrifting that occurs every year that would bring this down. My high case,
Gotcha.
if they're going to double that, if they're going to make it 28 terawatts, well, then you get to, I think, about 300 million and change year over year over year for a number of years. This base case would represent solar to about 32% of the global grid. This would represent closer to 65% of the global grid, just to give people the numbers. Now, 300 million troy ounces a year is a big number. I was just in a forum at the IPMI. Philip Newman,
Okay.
one of the managing directors of Metals Focus, he made the simple point, guys, 300 million troy ounces a year is enormous. That's a third of the silver supply going into just solar PV, guys. That's a
That's
big asset.
that's one thing. That's amazing.
And why I did this whole setup is, well, hold it. Again, these goalposts are changing. What the clean energy advocates wanting to do is constantly changing. And this week alone, well, here comes two new forecasts. One by this group, this Berm Reuter Research. I don't know if you know these guys. And then Solar Power Europe, a whole solar power consortium in Europe. They're calling for a case where, we just did this big jump where we had an 82% climb from 22 to 23 and have driven up our silver loadings now to 239 million troy ounces. This Bertner Research says, hey, just this year with a lot of back-end loading, that's going to be a plus 91% jump here. That would be over 400 million troy ounces of silver in this space.
Wow.
And then Solar Power Europe says, hey, we're going to get to a terawatt per year of new installations by 2028. That gets you over 500 million troy ounces a year. Now, I think these outlooks are a little bit aggressive, maybe a little bit too aggressive. But my point is, hang on, boys and girls. This can get exciting here. How much solar do we really want to put into this? And is this just green noise and hype, or is it real? I would argue this is a little bit hyped up, but just watch out, guys. This, we're not done with our ramp on solar yet, right? It's still coming. I don't know.
Well,
with all that setup,
I've been around IPMI for a long time. I've been a member of IPMI for a long time, man, and if they're projecting that, I want to ask you, when are we going to get out of silver deficit? I mean, are we discovering new production? Are we opening new mines? If somebody could show me a new production, I would be very interested in it, because it's not going to happen. I think that to go to your point, with just the European output, we're just going to leave copper to the side, because, oh, by the way, all of that has to be transmitted out and over some substance to get it to your home. We won't even talk about the fact that we're not going to have enough copper. But the thing is that the last numbers I looked at for colloidal spray on solar, they were having shortages in China, and their stockpile was 51% lower than it was last year. So they're either going to have to come to the market, and then what happens? I mean, if you remember, on the floor, I was the first guy to sell silver at $50. And I remember when a guy made the bid, buy him at 50, and I said sold, the whole floor went quiet. Nobody could even believe that silver traded at 50. And I think if these numbers are even halfway accurate, we're going to punch through 50 like it isn't even there.
Well, folks, we had a technical issue on my end. My computer just had to restart with a new BIOS, so I apologize to Pete. We lost Pete, but just to wrap up this conversation real quick, without Pete, we were talking about this dubious and accelerated solar ramp, which could tie up even more silver. And when we lost connection, Pete was asking, well, where is this silver going to come from? And that's exactly the final slide I wanted to show. The known reserves. So here's a historical chart you can see in this. These are USGS known reserves that are plotted out over time. And so you can see that we've climbed. We're sitting at about 16 billion troy ounces of global reserves. This equates to about 40 years worth of supply in these reserves. So really a challenge. Obviously, so much of silver is a byproduct mining. It's not even direct silver mining as the primary source. So just to illustrate yet another challenge on the silver front. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up. And I just want to thank Pete Thomas. What a fantastic interview. It was just a load of fun to talk through gold and silver with Pete. We'll have to have him back at a later time if he wants to talk PGMs. So thank you, Pete. Again, this is Matt Watson with Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution. Join us next week. Like and subscribe. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution with Matt Watson.